What do a Fortune 500 CEO, a global politician, a chart-topping hip-hop artist, and a maximum security prison inmate all actually have in common?
Well, they are all completely obsessed with a book that is, so potent and honestly so dangerous in its application that it is frequently banned in correctional facilities across the globe.
Right, which is just wild. We are talking about The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
Yeah, it's essentially the source code for human manipulation. I mean, the reason a prison warden bans it isn't because it contains maps or like physical blueprints for escape.
No, of course not.
Right. It's because it systematically teaches inmates how to dismantle authority, turn factions against each other, and, consolidate influence without ever throwing a single punch.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Our mission today is not to just sit here and recite a 25-year-old book.
Definitely not.
We're taking this notoriously Machiavellian operating system, which is basically a compilation of 3,000 years of ruthless human history, and we're updating it for the year 2026.
Exactly. We are filtering these ancient laws through a very modern lens. So we're looking at things like algorithmic influence, the hypermobility of the modern workforce, and honestly, the psychological warfare of digital ecosystems.
Because Greene originally formulated these laws by studying kings and courtiers and conquerors from centuries ago, right?
Yeah, people who operated in physical courts with literal guillotines.
Literally losing their heads.
Right. But today, the guillotines are reputational, the courts are digital platforms, and the underlying psychological drivers like fear, envy, ambition, they really haven't evolved a single inch.
Not at all. I mean, I spent the weekend completely immersed in this stack of sources. So the original laws, the modern business critiques, the behavioral science pushback.
And how did you feel after reading all of that?
Honestly, I walked away with this deeply unsettling feeling. Reading the material is like pulling back the drywall of civilization to just look at the raw wiring.
It really is.
Greene's fundamental premise is that power is an omnipresent game. You literally cannot opt out.
No, you can't.
Because by choosing not to play, you are simply volunteering to be a pawn on someone else's board.
And that forces you to confront a deeply uncomfortable view of human nature. Before we even get into the tactics, I think we have to examine that foundational philosophy.
Let's do it.
Because the architecture of this worldview, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's heavily indebted to some of the most cynical philosophical giants in history. Thomas Hobbes, for instance.
Right. Hobbes argued that without the strict enforcement of laws, the natural state of humanity is just a brutal, self-interested war of all against all.
Yeah, his exact phrasing from the 17th century was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short.
Wow. Uplifting guy.
Very. He viewed human beings as deeply paranoid creatures, perpetually driven to acquire more power simply to ensure their own survival. And you see that completely threaded through Greene's work.
Definitely.
And then, you layer in Sigmund Freud's concept of that primitive, impulsive part of our psyche that operates entirely on the pleasure principle.
Which includes a relentless, unconscious drive for dominance.
Exactly.
So the argument is that underneath all the corporate jargon and the polite emails and the HR protocols, we're really all just operating on these primal urges to dominate the person in the cubicle next to us.
That's the theory. According to this framework, the polite emails are just a highly sophisticated camouflage for what they call the will to power.
Which brings us to Nietzsche.
Right. Friedrich Nietzsche's contribution. Nietzsche proposed that this desire to exert one's will over others to achieve the highest possible position is the primary driving force in human behavior.
And he introduced this idea of master morality, right?
Yes. Where the powerful individual defines their own values and ethics, completely refusing to be constrained by the moral frameworks of the weak.
So, okay, I was looking at Stephen Petro's behavioral analysis in our sources, and it hit me. We really have to challenge this bleak foundation.
We do.
Like, is humanity really just a collection of power-hungry manipulators waiting for an opportunity to strike? Because Petro points out a massive logical trap in Greene's premise. It's a fallacy called begging the question.
Ah, the circular argument.
Exactly. Wait, no, not just circular. It's intellectually impenetrable by design.
How so?
Well, Greene assumes that everyone is solely motivated by power. So if you, as a reader, deny this and say, no, hey, I'm actually motivated by empathy and collaboration, the framework dictates that your denial is actually a highly sophisticated power play.
Oh, to mask your true ruthless intentions.
Right. You literally cannot argue against the theory without validating it.
It creates a totally closed ideological loop.
It's fascinating. And Petra also highlights a severe case of selection bias at work and how these historical laws were even formulated.
Oh, the survivorship bias.
Exactly. When we look back at history, the data set is inherently corrupted by survivorship.
Because the people who survived to actually commission the history books were the ones who were willing to be ruthless.
Precisely. We don't have extensive historical records of the, collaborative, empathetic leaders who built thriving local communities.
Right, because they didn't leave behind massive stone monuments built by conquered nations. Exactly. The selection bias makes the ruthless approach feel like the only effective approach, simply because it's the only one loudly recorded.
We are essentially looking at a highlight reel of historical ruthlessness and concluding that human society is nothing but a bloodbath.
And honestly, if you practice all 48 laws, you don't become a master of the universe, you become a clinical sociopath.
Literally.
Even Green himself has acknowledged that embodying every single law would make you an incredibly toxic, isolated, just horrible person to be around.
Okay, so if the foundation is plagued by selection bias and applying it fully turns you into a total pariah, what is the actual utility of this deep dive? Like, why are the most successful people on Earth studying it right now in 2026?
Well, because it is the ultimate martial art for the mind.
The martial art defense. I like that.
Right. Think about it. You do not learn a martial art to walk into a coffee shop and start breaking people's arms.
I mean, I hope not.
Yeah, you learn it so that if someone attacks you, you understand their biomechanics well enough to just neutralize them.
So it's defensive.
Entirely. The modern utility of these laws is defensive. Naive, well-intentioned people get crushed in corporate restructurings, they get manipulated by toxic partners, and outmaneuvered in negotiations.
Because they refuse to acknowledge that predatory dynamics actually exist.
Exactly.
It's an inoculation. You study the virus so your immune system can recognize a toxic colleague before they compromise your career.
That is a perfect framing.
I love that. So let's take that defensive mindset and really pivot into how these laws operate in the wild today. If power is fundamentally about how others perceive your reality, how does 17th century court politics translate to a world ruled by Google search indexing and TikTok algorithms?
The translation is surprisingly seamless, actually, if we look at Law 5.
Which is?
So much depends on your reputation, Gart, with your life. Now, historically, reputation was highly localized.
Right, you lived in a specific city-state or you served a specific monarch.
Yeah. Your physical social circle was fixed, meaning if your reputation was destroyed in that specific geography, your life was effectively over.
But the sources indicate a total inversion of that dynamic today. I mean, we have unprecedented physical mobility in 2026.
Absolutely.
If you experience a massive professional failure or like a total social fallout in one city, you can literally pack up, move across the country, and integrate into a completely new ecosystem. Local physical reputation is more fluid than it has ever been.
It is. But the catch is that while physical reputation is fluid, your digital aura is immutable.
It's forever.
Right. Modern reputation isn't built on local tavern gossip anymore. It's built on search engine optimization, AI data scraping, and a totally permanent social media footprint.
Keanu Reeves is the perfect illustrative example from the research on this.
Oh, he really is.
The vast majority of the human population has obviously never met him. We have no physical proximity to him whatsoever. Yet, he benefits from a completely bulletproof digital aura.
The algorithmic consensus is just that he has a heart of gold.
The digital saint.
He is, and the power in that perception is immense. If a highly damaging rumor were to surface about him tomorrow, the collective cognitive dissonance would be so strong that the public would actively reject the information.
They would defend his reputation on his behalf.
Exactly. That level of digital goodwill makes an individual nearly untouchable.
Which raises a really terrifying question for the modern professional.
What's that?
What if you try to opt out? What if you decide the game is too risky, so you delete your profiles, you scrub your data, and you try to become a digital ghost?
Well, in a high-information environment, a vacuum doesn't signal mystery. It signals a threat.
That's exactly what struck me. If a recruiter or a potential angel investor or even a first date searches your name and finds a total void, they don't think you're interestingly enigmatic.
No, they assume you are hiding something catastrophic. Or worse, that you are completely irrelevant to the modern world.
Right. Your invisibility basically becomes a blank canvas for all of their anxieties.
Yeah.
You completely surrender control of your own narrative.
Which naturally bridges us directly to Law 6.
Court attention at all costs.
Yes. The foundational insight here is that being ignored is a fate far worse than being slandered.
And in 2026, courting attention is entirely synonymous with courting the algorithm.
It really is. The underlying mechanics of modern influence platforms, they don't run on nuance. They run on dopamine loops and engagement metrics.
And the most potent driver of engagement is polarization.
Always. Let's analyze this neutrally, looking purely at the mechanics of influence, okay? The sources highlight Donald Trump and Pablo Picasso as masterclass examples of hacking attention.
Okay, let's break that down.
Well, Trump understood intuitively that the modern media cycle requires an endless supply of fuel.
Right.
So by making statements that were highly polarizing, completely unpredictable, and entirely outside the accepted political syntax, he forced the entire global media apparatus to react to his narrative.
He literally hijacked their nervous system.
Yes. Whether a network was praising him or dedicating 24 hours a day to tearing him down, he remained the absolute center of gravity.
His opponents were constantly playing defense on a board that he had already designed.
Exactly. And Picasso executed the exact same psychological hack in the art world.
Really? How so?
He refused to let the public grow comfortable with him. He went from the blue period to rose to cubism to surrealism.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. Every single time the critics felt they understood him, he just shattered their framework. The conversation was never allowed to settle. It was always, what is Picasso doing to the art world now?
So the functional lesson here
Yeah.
is that attention is the base currency of modern power.
It prevents you from being commoditized.
Right. If you are an architect or a software engineer or a writer, being highly competent just isn't enough anymore. If the ecosystem doesn't know you exist, your competence is useless.
Absolutely. But there is a massive paradox in how you actually frame that attention once you have it.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, once you have the spotlight, how do you present your competence?
Yeah.
Law 30 dictates, make your accomplishments seem effortless.
Oh, right. Historically, visible labor was for the peasant class.
Exactly. If you were a courtier, you had to hide the fact that you practiced your poetry or studied your statecraft. You needed to appear touched by the divine, like a natural genius.
But we have experienced a massive cultural whiplash on this specific point.
Oh, completely.
Because in 2026, if you present yourself as a flawless genius who just achieves success without breaking a sweat, the public doesn't revere you. They deeply resent you.
They do. They attribute your success to privilege or nepotism or just genetics.
Right. The democratization of media has created a culture that completely fetishizes the grind.
The behind-the-scenes documentary has basically replaced the polished final product as the primary source of connection.
Look at the modern titans of influence, like creators and entrepreneurs like Alex Hormozy or Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, perfect examples.
They don't hide their exhaustion. They weaponize it. They broadcast the grueling hours, the failures, the sheer caloric output of their ambition.
They want the audience to see the sweat because sweat is the new authenticity. Yet, the psychological allure of the natural genius hasn't entirely disappeared. People still, deep down, want to believe in magic.
So what's the optimized strategy for Law 30 today?
It's a hybrid approach. You frame your success as a unique combination of the two.
Okay, so the narrative becomes, like, I possess a high degree of natural intuition for this industry, but my dominance is a direct result of outworking every single person in my competitive set.
It's brilliant because it triggers both psychological levers at the same time.
The audience admires the innate talent, which creates an aura of authority.
Right. But they also respect the visible labor, which creates relatability and neutralizes the envy.
It totally manages the audience's ego.
It does. And managing ego extends entirely to how we physically present ourselves as well. Consider Law 34. Be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated like one.
Historically, this was literal, right? You wore purple velvet and gold thread and furs.
You signaled power through extreme financial expenditure on your wardrobe.
But the signaling mechanism is completely inverted now.
It has. Today, a finely tailored suit is highly accessible. Even an intern can finance a luxury watch.
Right. The visual markers of traditional wealth have been totally commoditized by fast fashion and the credit economy.
Consequently, dressing up no longer signals intrinsic power. It actually signals submission.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It signals that you are actively trying to impress the person across the table.
This brings in the concept of sprezzatura, right? A studied carelessness, like an almost arrogant casualness.
Exactly. It's the signaling theory of evolutionary biology applied to the boardroom, the handicap principle.
Right, okay. So in biology, a peacock's massive, heavy tail is a handicap. It says to predators, I am so fast and fit that I can survive even while dragging this massive weight around.
Precisely, and in the modern corporate ecosystem, casual wear functions the exact same way.
It's the tech founder walking into a venture capital meeting in a faded t-shirt and worn-out sneakers while all the bankers are sweating in three-piece suits.
Or Steve Jobs delivering the most important product keynotes in human history wearing a dad fleece and jeans.
So the power dynamic is entirely contextual.
Entirely. By intentionally underdressing in a room where a strict dress code is culturally enforced, you are silently broadcasting ultimate independence.
You are basically stating, I am the platform, you operate on my infrastructure, my intrinsic value is so undeniable that I refuse to participate in your superficial rituals of fabric.
It's the ultimate flex.
Because it forces the room to acknowledge that your mind is worth more than their conformity.
Exactly. So, okay, we've established how to engineer this bulletproof digital aura, how to capture attention, how to project effortless superiority.
Right.
But aura really only gets you through the lobby. What happens when you actually sit down at the desk and your direct manager feels threatened by that exact reputation we just spent all this time building?
Well, then we enter the mechanics of workplace strategy, which requires a deep understanding of probably the most dangerous and most misunderstood law in the book.
Law 1.
Never outshine the master.
Yes. The historical cautionary tale here is Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister for King Louis XIV.
Oh, this story is wild.
It is. Fouquet was a visionary who threw a party at his newly constructed chateau. And the party was so lavish, so intellectually and aesthetically superior to anything the king himself possessed, that Louis XIV felt deeply emasculated.
His ego was bruised.
Severely. So he had his finance minister arrested on totally fabricated charges and locked in a dungeon for the rest of his natural life.
The lesson was simple. In a rigid hierarchy, triggering your superior's insecurity is an existential threat.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
You and I aren't working in a 17th century monarchy.
Thank goodness.
Right. We are in a matrixed organization in 2026.
So if my analysis is sharper than my director's, or my pitch is more innovative, and I intentionally dumb down my output just to massage their fragile ego, I am actively sabotaging my own earning potential.
You are. You really are. And the data on modern career trajectories makes this abundantly clear.
Yeah, the sources reference Harvard Business Review research regarding the gatekeeping manager.
Right. These are mid-level leaders who basically hoard top talent. They suppress their visibility to senior leadership and actively prevent their subordinates from advancing.
Because it threatens their own stability.
Exactly. And the ADP payroll data completely compounds this. It shows that in today's hyperfluid job market, staying in the exact same role under the exact same manager for more than 3 years mathematically slashes your lifetime earning potential.
Loyalty to a mediocre boss is a financial penalty.
Therefore, Law 1 requires a radical update. The mandate is no longer to flatter the master, it is to outgrow the master.
You leapfrog them.
You leapfrog them.
But how do you do that practically without, getting fired before you actually make the jump?
You build a shadow network. You don't openly rebel against your manager. You continue to deliver your core metrics flawlessly.
Okay.
But you systematically volunteer for cross-functional projects that give you direct visibility to their superiors or to leaders in entirely different departments.
You cultivate weak tie relationships outside your direct reporting line.
Exactly. You essentially build your own internal brand equity that your boss simply cannot control.
And then when the leverage shifts, you transition laterally or upward, completely bypassing the gatekeeper.
Right. You don't outshine the master to their face, you cast a shadow over them from a higher altitude.
It's a structural bypass.
It is. But eventually, you become the master. You move into a leadership position yourself.
Which brings us to Law 7. Let others do the work, but always take the credit.
Now, this one is pure poison in the modern era.
Pure poison. Historically, if a general stole the credit for a brilliant tactical maneuver devised by a lieutenant, the lieutenant had absolutely no recourse.
None. But the power dynamic of talent has completely flipped. Capital is abundant in 2026. Elite talent is scarce.
The sources cite a really brilliant cultural touchstone for this, the show Mad Men.
Oh, it's such a good example.
Right. Don Draper, the creative director, he absorbs a deeply personal, brilliant pitch from his copywriter, Peggy. He doesn't credit her. He simply tells her that's what the money is for.
He views her intellectual property as his divine right.
Exactly. And the result? She eventually packs up her genius and walks out the door to a rival agency.
Because in an era of remote work and high talent mobility, Law 7 is a blueprint for total organizational collapse.
It is. If you appropriate your team's ideas to look like a hyper-productive genius to your board of directors, sure, you might secure a temporary bonus.
But you will trigger an exodus of your top-tier performers.
You'll be left managing a team of low-agency, demotivated employees who stay only because they lack the leverage to actually leave.
So the modern adaptation is radical generosity with credit.
Radical generosity, I like that.
It's not just generosity, though. It's high-leverage strategy. By aggressively pushing the spotlight onto your subordinates, you aren't diminishing your power at all. You are engineering extreme loyalty.
Because senior leadership already knows you manage the team anyway.
Right. If your team is constantly producing lauded, brilliant work, the halo effect inevitably rests on your shoulders regardless.
You become known as the ultimate talent incubator. Growing the pie is infinitely more powerful than stealing a single slice.
It fundamentally changes how you influence people, which ties directly into Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude.
Green's original assessment of human nature here is deeply cynical.
Very.
He posits that people don't care about the favors you did for them last year. If you want something, find out what they desire right now: money, status, security, and just dangle it in front of them.
And while that mechanic still operates, the definition of self-interest has undergone a profound evolution. We really have to look at how Maslow's hierarchy of needs functions in a modern knowledge-based economy.
Because for a massive segment of the professional class, base survival and security needs are largely met.
Right. They aren't terrified of starvation. They are terrified of insignificance.
They are operating at the top of the pyramid, seeking self-actualization and purpose.
Exactly. So appealing purely to base financial self-interest is often a weak lever now. The most sophisticated modern application of Law 13 is appealing to higher ideals.
You align your request with their desire to feel morally significant.
Yes. And the consumer market proves this flawlessly.
Oh, totally. Why does a customer pay a 40% premium for Starbucks Fair Trade coffee? Or actively seek out dolphin-safe tuna? Or buy a pair of shoes because the company promises to donate a second pair?
They are purchasing moral absolution.
Wow.
The highest profit margins in the modern economy are generated when you allow a consumer or an employee to virtue signal.
You aren't selling them coffee, you're selling them the identity of being a globally conscious citizen.
Exactly. And in a corporate environment, if you want your team to work late on a Friday, you don't just offer them overtime pay.
You frame the project as a critical mission that is going to disrupt a stagnant industry or significantly improve user lives.
Right. You provide the moral high ground, and they will volunteer their exhaustion. It's a breathtakingly effective manipulation of the human need for meaning.
It really is. It is highly effective and often mutually beneficial. But we have to descend from the high ground for a moment.
Let's do it.
What happens when the ecosystem isn't cooperative? What happens when you encounter active hostility or toxicity, or a competitor actively trying to dismantle your progress?
We have to move into conflict and defense. Let's look at the actual combat application of these laws, starting with Law 9. Win through actions, never through argument.
Okay, what's the psychological mechanism here?
It's the backfire effect. When you engage in a direct verbal argument with someone, especially in a professional setting, you trigger their amygdala.
Their fight or flight response.
Yes. Their brain perceives a threat to their ego, and they will subconsciously double down on their original position, regardless of the logic you present to them.
Even if you bring out the spreadsheets and empirically dismantle their argument in front of the entire department.
You haven't won. You've achieved a Pyrrhic victory.
You won the logic puzzle, but you humiliated them socially.
Exactly. And that resentment doesn't just dissipate when the meeting ends. It calcifies into a long-term vendetta. They will smile at the water cooler while actively looking for ways to sabotage your next initiative.
So the strategic imperative is to bypass their ego entirely.
Demonstrate, do not explain.
How does that actually look in a modern workflow, though? Let's say a senior colleague insists your proposed marketing strategy will totally alienate the core demographic. If I argue, I trigger the backfire effect.
Right, so you don't argue, you agree to disagree, and then you quietly run a micropilot program on a localized segment of the audience.
Oh, I see.
You collect undeniable, high-converting data. A month later, you present the results not as a weapon to prove them wrong, but as an objective discovery for the team's benefit.
You let the reality of the outcome suffocate their objection.
Exactly. They can't argue with the math. And because you didn't attack them personally, they have room to adjust their stance without losing face.
That's brilliant. But what if it's not just a disagreement over strategy? What if you are dealing with a direct competitor who actually wants to put you out of business?
Well, Law 15 says, crush your enemy totally.
Which sounds intense.
The ancient logic was absolute annihilation. If you defeat an enemy but leave them alive, they will spend the rest of their days plotting revenge. You must salt the earth.
Right. But applying that literally in 2026 is a fast track to antitrust lawsuits, massive PR disasters, and viral cancellations. You can't just engage in a scorched earth campaign against a rival firm, or a dissenting employee for that matter.
No, you can't. The strategy of neutralization has evolved into ecosystem warfare. You don't crush the enemy, you absorb them.
Collaborate until you own them.
The ultimate Silicon Valley playbook.
Let's talk about that because it's so prevalent.
Look at how major tech conglomerates handle scrappy, highly innovative startups. 10 years ago, they might have engaged in a bloody expensive price war just to starve the startup of capital.
But today,
they build an API integration. They invite the startup into their app store. They offer them back-end server support at a massive discount.
they make the startup entirely dependent on their infrastructure.
It's parasitic, but framed as a partnership.
Right. And then once the startup relies on the conglomerate for like 80% of its user acquisition, the conglomerate simply changes the algorithm, throttles their access, and forces a buyout for pennies on the dollar.
The enemy isn't crushed. They are quietly digested.
Wow. And internally, as a manager dealing with a truly toxic employee who is poisoning team morale, the modern equivalent of Law 15 is basically swift, emotionless excision.
Yes. You don't put a deeply malignant employee on a 6-month performance improvement plan.
You don't try to rehabilitate a narcissist who is destabilizing your top performers.
You identify the behavioral rot, you involve HR immediately, you pay out the severance, and you remove them from the ecosystem by the end of the day.
You crush the behavior by eliminating its host from your environment.
But wait, what if you don't have the institutional power to fire them? What if the toxic individual is a peer or an aggressive neighbor or, a manipulative family member who feeds on conflict?
That brings us to what I consider the most powerful defensive capability in the entire book, Law 36,
Disdain things you cannot have.
which translates in human dynamics to ignoring is the best revenge.
It is neurologically agonizing to execute, but devastating in its effectiveness.
It really is. When a toxic person attacks you or sends a wildly out-of-line email or makes a passive-aggressive comment, your biological instinct is to defend your territory.
Your ego just screams, I have to correct the record, I have to put them in their place.
But the moment you engage, you validate their reality. You signal that their behavior actually has the power to alter your emotional state.
The sources recount a profound anecdote from Robert Greene's own life about this.
Oh, the business partner. Yes. He had a business partner who became increasingly erratic and toxic, just bombarding him with angry emails, fabricating crises, desperately trying to pull Greene into this chaotic emotional vortex.
But Greene recognized the mechanism. The partner wasn't looking for a solution, he was looking for a supply of emotional energy.
So Greene starved him. He didn't send a measured professional response. He didn't block him aggressively, which, is still a form of reaction.
Right.
He simply stopped acknowledging his existence entirely. He let the emails just fall into the void.
It is the psychological equivalent of starving a fire of oxygen. A manipulator's power is entirely dependent on the friction of your response.
So when you refuse to provide that friction, you don't just protect your own cognitive bandwidth, you actively render them powerless.
It induces a state of absolute panic in the manipulator because their tools no longer work on the terminal. Total indifference is the ultimate expression of dominance.
It's so powerful. But, as we map out all these tactics, starving people of attention, absorbing competitors, manipulating the moral high ground, we have to confront the systemic toll this actually takes on the practitioner.
We have to talk about the cost of the game.
Reading through these strategies, realizing how thoroughly they can be applied to literally every interaction, the overwhelming sensation I felt wasn't empowerment. It was profound exhaustion.
I completely understand that. And there is a vital piece of criticism in our sources from a strategist known as the rational RAM.
Okay, let's get into the critique.
The critique argues that the 48 laws are purely a manual for tactical positioning. They teach you how to climb the ladder, how to guard your flanks, and outmaneuver the competition. But the book is completely devoid of any framework for what to do once you actually acquire the power.
Right. It teaches you how to conquer the kingdom, but not how to govern it.
Exactly. It offers zero blueprints for building a sustainable legacy, or fostering genuine trust, or leading a team toward a shared positive vision. It treats every single human interaction as a zero-sum transaction.
And a life lived entirely as a zero-sum transaction leads directly to paranoia.
It has to. If you are waking up every morning hypersensitive to how your digital aura is perceived, carefully calibrating your casual wear to project sprezzatura, analyzing your boss's insecurities, and treating your peers as potential threats to be managed.
You are operating in a state of continuous cognitive overload.
Yes. The rational RAM highlights the exact cost.
Right.
Winning the moment using a ruthless law almost always costs you the decade.
Let's look at an example. Say you utilize Law 14, pose as a friend, work as a spy.
Okay.
You take a colleague out for drinks. You pretend to commiserate with their frustrations. You extract highly sensitive information about their department, and you use it to secure a promotion for yourself.
Well, you won the promotion.
But you have totally detonated your long-term reputation. That colleague will never trust you again.
They will actively warn others about your nature.
Exactly. You gain temporary leverage, but you permanently destroy your ability to build alliances. You reach the top of the hierarchy, but you arrive completely isolated, surrounded by people who are just waiting for your inevitable misstep so they can cannibalize you using the exact same laws.
It's a completely self-consuming cycle. So how do we synthesize this?
That's the question.
If we acknowledge that understanding these laws is essential for defense and survival, but practicing them ruthlessly leads to paranoid isolation, where is the ethical equilibrium?
I think the synthesis requires understanding that power itself, like gravity or electricity, is entirely immoral.
The 48 laws are essentially the laws of psychological physics.
Right. Like a hammer. A hammer doesn't have an ethical alignment.
No, you can use it to build a shelter for your community, or you can use it to shatter your neighbor's window. The morality exists solely in the intent of the architect wielding the tool.
So in 2026, the objective isn't to remain blissfully ignorant of the game. The objective is to see the invisible chessboard clearly, to understand the motivations of the people moving the pieces, and to use that profound understanding to architect win-win scenarios.
Yes. You use your grasp of human nature to navigate corporate politics without collateral damage.
You use your knowledge of Law 15 to swiftly remove a toxic predator from your organization to protect your team.
You use Law 13 to align your company's goals with the genuine betterment of the community.
You master the dark arts so you can effectively enforce the light. You play the game not to destroy the other players, but to elevate the board itself.
Which brings us perfectly to the ultimate paradox of the book. The final instruction that Robert Greene gives after walking you through 47 rigid, highly specific tactical rules.
Law 48, assume formlessness.
It is a stroke of structural genius.
It really is. After feeding you an encyclopedia strategy, the final law dictates that you must throw the encyclopedia away.
Because rigidity is death. If you become deeply attached to a specific system, or a predictable pattern of behavior, or even a rigid professional identity, you become incredibly easy to defeat.
The moment someone knows exactly how you will react, they own you.
In military history, it's the difference between a massive, slow-moving infantry line in bright red coats and a decentralized guerrilla force that strikes and immediately melts back into the jungle.
And in the modern economy, formlessness is the ultimate competitive advantage.
It is the startup that realizes its core product is failing and pivots its entire architecture over a single weekend.
Is the writer or engineer who sees artificial intelligence automating their specific workflow, and rather than fighting the technology, instantly morphs into an AI prompt architect.
It is the realization that the moment you believe you have discovered the perfect playbook, the underlying rules of the universe shift.
Formlessness is the highest level of human mastery. It is the ability to drop your ego, look at a chaotic situation without the bias of past victories, and respond fluidly to the exact demands of the present moment. Be like water.
It requires immense psychological security to let go of the very tactics that made you successful in the first place.
It really does. Wow.
Yeah.
This has been an absolutely staggering journey through the deep architecture of human behavior. We took a 17th century survival guide and recompiled it for a digital world that is moving way faster than human psychology can naturally process.
It's been fascinating.
To everyone listening, I want to leave you with a provocation. Think back to the very beginning of this conversation. We discussed how comfortable it is to pretend that life is a clean, polite game of checkers where everyone follows the rules. I want you to think about a specific moment in your recent past where you felt a complete loss of agency. Maybe you were sidelined in a critical meeting. Maybe you found yourself trapped in a negotiation where the other party seemed to hold all the leverage. Or maybe you were dealing with a relationship dynamic where you were constantly playing defense, always apologizing for things you didn't do. Look at that moment through the lens we've just constructed. Were you playing by polite, predictable rules that the other person had quietly abandoned years ago? Power is not about malice. Power is about clarity. It is about turning the lights on in a dark room. Your assignment as you move through your week is simply to observe. Stop judging the people in your ecosystem by the polished words in their Slack messages or the curated aesthetics of their social feeds. Watch the mechanics of their actions. Observe the tangible outcomes they consistently engineer. Who is actively shaping the narrative in your environment? Who is absorbing the credit? Who is subtly demanding your emotional reactions? Once you begin to see the invisible network of strings pulling the pieces around you, the only question left is, what are you going to do about it?